Hi, my name's James. I hope you're all well, and today we're going to look at developing film at home. Like many aspects of photography, there's a lot of misconceptions as to what you actually need to develop film photography at home. Today I'm going to show you how to do it with the least possible equipment. Obviously anything else is a bonus, but this is how to do it with the least amount of stuff. So, to develop film at home, what you will need is some film, a developing tank, a funnel, something to measure temperature with, a measuring cylinder, a dark bag, not always essential, but a bucket, and of course your chemicals and something to keep them in. So the chemicals I'm using is what's called the Rollei Digibase system. This is a C41 system which will develop colour film and also some Ilford black and white films that use colour chemicals, and I bought it from First Call Photographic. This is a system that is enough to develop 100 rolls of 36 exposure 35mm film. So you're probably watching this thinking, what's the benefit of developing film at home? And the main benefit is cost. Looking at this in comparison, my Rollei Digibase system cost me £50 and that will develop 100 rolls of film. Add in the other bits I've bought, I've probably taken up to about £70 buying from charity shops and second-hand bits and what have you. So a £70 expense to get me 100 rolls of film developed. That works out at around 70 pence per roll. To put this into comparison, getting it developed in a shop, say for example I would typically use Boots until they recently stopped developing film. This would typically cost me between £8 and £10 a roll, depending on if it was a 24 or a 36 exposure, and if I wanted it burnt to disc, which 99 times out of 100 I did. So when looking to develop at home, the first thing you need to do is mix your chemicals. The Rollei Digibase system is fairly simple to put together and gives you all the measurements here depending on your tank size, what you're actually wanting to develop and everything like that. I have an old Paterson tank I bought second hand. This works at 590 millilitres or about 10 fluid ounces because it's old and fluid ounces. So to do this I have to mix up 590 millilitres of each of the chemicals I wish to use. Finding bottles for this size is really annoying. I can recommend Cobra bottles because they work at 620 millilitres, so they were big enough to actually store all the chemicals I needed. So the first part you've got is the developer, the second stage is the bleach, third stage is the fixer, the fourth stage is the stabiliser. Now one thing that I have done is not only have I written what's in the bottle, I've also written how many exposures that I've got from that bottle. Now each set of chemicals will give you a different amount of exposures, so you will have to mix them up at different rates, which is why it's very important to keep a track of how far you are along, so that when you're spent with your chemicals you know to change them over. One thing that I've also done is kept them in brown bottles. This is to protect them against sunlight. Although these aren't photosensitive chemicals, more safety is better than less safety, eh? So now you've got your chemicals mixed up, the next stage to do is get your chemicals up to temperature. The Rollei Digibase system works from a range of temperatures, going all the way up from room temperature to high 30 degrees. Previously I've done them between say 32 and 37 depending on what it is. It is quite hard to maintain unless you've got proper equipment. I'll show you how I'll kind of talk you through how I did that in a moment. Today we're going to be developing these chemicals at room temperature, so around 27 degrees-ish. What are the advantages and disadvantages of different temperatures? Well, a warmer temperature will get you to developing time faster. So if I'm developing at say 37 degrees, I'm literally going to have 2 rolls of film developed in under 10 minutes. Whereas if I'm developing at room temperature like I am today, it's going to be a much longer process. This is because these chemicals work better at higher temperatures. However, the disadvantages are that you've got to be really on it with your timekeeping. If you are working at these hotter temperatures, you've got to be really accurate and you've got to be careful. I've had a couple of cock-ups in my last session which I wasn't happy with at all for a couple of reasons, and I'll go through those throughout the video as to why, but one of them was temperature, a combination of too much temperature and also too many agitations when I was. This led my film to have a weird magenta cast. The good thing about the system as well is with the instructions it does actually give you a little troubleshooting, which is why I know that that was the cause. So we're going to be going a lower temperature and slower today. So on the subject of temperature, this is where the bucket and the thermometer come in. Now obviously your thermometer is to keep track of what your temperature is. I've just got a food thermometer from Tesco. I think it cost me like 10 quid, something like that. And I use this to actually stick in the chemicals and see what the chemicals are at. The bucket is then so I can pour a couple of degrees above what I want my temperature to be and then rest my chemicals in the bucket so they can get up to temperature. I'd recommend getting your chemicals up to temperature before you look at loading your film in, and we'll go through why in a bit. The other reason why I recommend a bucket is I like to keep my sink free. So what I like to do is I like to keep my measuring cylinder when I'm doing my wash cycles and also my developing tank in the sink, so that then if there's any overspill or anything like that, it's just going straight down the sink and not onto my side, damaging my worktops or damaging anything that I've got there, just as a precautionary measure. So waiting for your chemicals to get to the correct temperature is probably one of the longest processes in doing film developing, which is why I recommend you set your temperatures up first, and then whilst your chemicals are acclimatizing to those temperatures, you then start loading up your film into your spools, which is what we're going to look at now. So in the developing tank there's a couple of reels. So you've got two lids. So you've got your first lid. This is so you can pour your chemicals in and also out of the tank. You've then got your main lid, which will seal it from light. This is a little light seal. Again, it will just help protect it from the light to make sure that no light actually gets into the tank. This is allow you to do this in daylight. Once you're into the tank, you've got a couple of spools. Mine's got two, and these will actually expand and contract to give me different sizes. So this one's set for 35mm, but if I undo this, I can then expand it and make it as large, so I can do it for larger formats as well, which is ideal. One thing that's important to note as well is the spools mount onto this black thing here, technical term. The base of this goes on the bottom of the tank, not on the top. The mistake I made the first couple of times when I was developing my own film, and as I was doing my agitations, the film was actually coming at the top because the tank wasn't closed properly. So one thing to bear in mind. So now that's done, we're actually going to look at loading your film into the cassette itself. This is a roll of Fuji Superior 200 that has been in the back of my Minolta Highmatic, and that I've accidentally opened the door on many times. It's a camera I don't use very often, if at all, so the amount of times I open the back and go, there's a roll in there. So this has been opened about 4 or 5 times, so it's completely wasted, it's useless. I'm going to show you how to load a cassette up in the daylight. So the first thing you want to do with your cassette is just make sure that these little nails here are point at the same point before you do anything else. I've put these in a dark bag before, and then as I've been fiddling around gone, wait, they're on the wrong place, had to disassemble it in the dark and then actually reassemble it together to get them on the right point. So make sure that they are level with each other, so when you're loading it on, they're in the right place. So what you're going to need some kind of bottle opener, and you're just going to take that and you're going to open up your film canister like so. So this just comes off, and then if I actually wind this in, and then what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to take your film out. What you then need to do is load it into the little spool here. So you want to load this up so that these bits are matching, and once you've got it in enough, you'll feel it, and then and this is where you can see it's going wrong. So it's very difficult to do, especially if you're in a dark bag. So I'd recommend giving it at least one practice run first. And again, we're having the same issue here, where it's just kind of getting caught up. So this is what caused me issues when I last did developing. The reason is because the outside was absolutely fine, but when you got to the inside, because it was getting caught up in itself, all the film was actually making contact, and as a result the chemicals weren't able to get round the film and actually develop it properly. So that caused me a lot of issues last time round. So what I've actually done is I've just cut the end off here, which wouldn't really be usable anyway, and that was what was causing it to feed in the right way round, the wrong way round. So now I'm having a much easier time actually loading in my film. So what you can do is you can just start spinning it around, and as you can see we've jammed again slightly, but that's kind of just fixed itself. So we're loading around. You might find times where you feel a bit of resistance. Like now, it seems to have been caught up. This is probably one of the hardest bits of actually developing your film, is getting on the bloody thing. So there we have it. We eventually have our roll of film on the spool. So what you'll see is these lines here, these lines that kind of filter the film round and kind of allow it to go into a semicircle. Like I said, the issue I had when I did my last lot of developing is because it kept getting caught, it actually bunched up, so the film was touching each other, and as a result the chemicals couldn't get in between it and develop it properly. So I only had like the first kind of 10 shots of each reel that were on this end here actually developed. The rest of it just all came out black because it didn't get touched by the film, by the chemicals even. So now you've practiced a couple of times getting your film onto the spool, it's time to take it into the dark bag. So the dark bag itself is made of 2 sleeves, which you obviously put your arms in. You've then also got you've got like an inner layer and then a bag within a bag. The bag within the bag is what everything needs to go into. So make sure that you're being very careful. It is very easy to accidentally get something in between bag number 1 and bag number 2. It's very easy to slip something in there by accident. So everything that needs to go into your bag includes your spool or your spools, depending on how many films you're developing, and any films you wish to develop need to go in there as well. Your entire dark tank, including all of the components, including the internal cylinder with a bobby, the lid, the light ring that I've left on the floor, the tub and the other lid, a bottle opener or some kind of opener that you can get your film canisters open with, and something to cut your film with. This could be scissors. I've used box cutters in the past as well. One thing that is important to note, so I bought this bag second hand from a charity shop in Romsey. This is the British Red Cross charity shop in Romsey. They do a lot of film photography gear in there, which is fantastic. A couple of things to note, where it is old, it's not always going to be perfect. So this, my sleeve is obviously significantly bigger than my arm. The elastic's gone. I mean, I know I have tiny arms, but you know, the elastic's gone on this, so it's just worth noting that you need like some hair bands or something to tie around it and then make sure it's tight, because if you have light coming in here, you risk completely nullifying the fact that you're using a bag that stops light coming in. Another point to note is if you're like me and you wear some kind of smartwatch, make sure you either remove it or you put it onto cinema mode or something. A lot of them will be sensitive to wrist movement. Obviously when you're doing that, when you're doing the spills, your watch is going to be moving, and as a result the screen might come on at that point. So just make sure that you either remove it or you put it onto cinema mode or something to stop the screen actually flashing up and therefore potentially ruining your film.